and Curator Evan here. I'm on the cigarette deck right now. I'm currently on the lookout for any Japanese planes that might sink USS Cod. But the problem is I have to go to the bathroom. No problem. The pee relief tube is right there. It was very easy for people on lookout duty during World War II and during COD service during the Cold War to relieve themselves. The same could not be said on STS-41-D, which is the topic of today's conversation with Mike Mullane and I.
We have a relatively sophisticated audience, and so I don't feel I'm being too tacky if I say, what does that remind you of?
First of all, this is, of course, the end result of a device of perhaps one of the most difficult engineering feats that NASA had to face.
Can you tell me about what it was like using the Apollo bags on STS-41-D?
Well, that was, what happened there on my first flight is our urinal had a malfunction. Basically, our toilet's a vacuum cleaner is what it is. Has a urinal hose that looks just exactly like a vacuum cleaner hose, and there's different shaped funnels on the end of it for males and females to use. The solid waste is collected through a small opening on top of what looks like a RV camper toilet. It's a small opening, and it has air being sucked down, so the waste is being pulled away from your body down inside a container. So that's how that's supposed to work. On our mission, the urinal, there was a heater at the port on the port side of the vehicle, and that froze and failed, and so the urine was freezing to the side of the vehicle, which was a danger to reentry because it could break off and hit your heat tile in the tail and kill you. I joke in the book about, be killed by your own urine isn't an epitaph you really want to have on your tombstone.
It was along about the same time that we were doing the IFM that we discovered we had the icicle on the dump port. And at this particular time, we were going to go out and break it off. Judy came up and handled the communications and kept me honest with the RMS while we were doing this task, double-checking on the procedures. The ground really did a super job in putting together the procedures to do it. Here's what it looked like as we started the wastewater dump. You can see the size of the icicle on the supply port. Now watch very closely at the bottom, the wastewater dump port, and you'll see that big icicle growing right before your eyes. It grew dramatically fast. I couldn't believe what we were looking at.
But anyway, we couldn't use the urinal, and so we had to use our emergency toilet is what the primary toilet was for the Apollo astronauts. And they're called Apollo bags. They're plastic bags. Imagine a top hat that has a rim on it, but it's very thin, well, thinner than a regular top hat, and it's up, maybe a foot or so. So that was the primary solid waste collection feature for the Apollo astronauts. They took these out. It has sticky tape on it. I mean, you pull a piece of paper off it, so it's sticky on the plastic that's exposed. You got to, open the tube there that's the plastic, and then you stick it to your rear end. That's what you pooped in if you were headed to the moon.
Now, what NASA had done, I think incorrectly in their engineering, they put a glue on here that was a little bit too gluey, too tight. And if you had any amount of hair at all there, you just about killed yourself trying to get rid of this thing. But anyway,
and fortunately, our solid waste collection feature of our toilet continued to work, but we couldn't pee in the urinal hose. So we had to break out these Apollo bags and pee in them. And we very quickly learned you cannot, in weightlessness, just pee in a plastic bag because it splashes everywhere. It doesn't pool at the bottom of anything. It's just floating in there, and it's very difficult to contain, and your crotch gets soaked in urine. It's just incredibly messy to use. But we learned that if we put socks in or a washcloth or anything cloth and peed on that, the wicking in weightlessness, that wicking feature still works. So you could pee and it would wick into that fabric. But the problem there is your flow had to be carefully regulated. If you peed too fast, then it would the wicking couldn't get it all, and so you would have the same problem with free urine. And if you went too slow, then the urine wouldn't detach from your penis for a male. It doesn't detach, just starts growing as a big ball in the end of your penis. So it had to be regulated just right. And so we learned real fast that you had to pee in on a cloth to at the right speed to make sure that it worked functionally. And by the way, on that, we had Judy Resnick on that mission, and obviously for a woman it'd be much more difficult to use those things. And there's a term called ullage, which means room remaining in a tank. If somebody says, "Oh, the ullage in this tank is 50%," it means you got 50% of volume left to use. Mission Control sent up a message to us that they estimated our toilet could be used for another like 2 man days or something like that. And clearly the message to us was, hey, Judy, could you continue to use the urinal? You guys just pee in the bags. And Judy did not do that. And the reason she didn't is she knew that she would be, that she knew she was the second American woman to fly in space behind Sally. Those women were terrified of doing anything that would reveal they were different than a man. And so if she was later came out that the Mission Control cut her some slack to use the urinal to differentiate her from the males on the flight, that would be the capital sin that any of those early women could ever commit, to show a difference in their performance to a man. So I joke, it's not a joke, it's reality, is because the press they were focused, hyper-focused on seeing any difference between these early women and men. That hyper-focused on it, and the women knew it. So I joke that Judy could have gone up there and found the cure to cancer. She could have gone out on a spacewalk and pushed an asteroid away that was going to end all life on Earth. And you know what the headline of that newspaper would be? Female astronaut cut slack on using urinal. And then the little tiny sidebar, it says, cure cancer and save the Earth. That'd be on page 10. The headline would be that she was different than a man. And, that was all bullshit too, but that the women had that cross to bear.
Well, and I remember watching, I think it was an interview she did with Tom Brokaw, and it was a horrible interview.
For 20 years in this country, the word astronaut automatically meant a man, but that's changed. In fact, beginning in 1978, NASA began accepting the first women astronauts. There are now 8 out of the 81 members of the astronaut corps based in Houston. One of the first half dozen to be accepted is Judy Resnick, now 32 years old, a native of Akron, the holder of a doctorate in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland. She is single, she plays the piano, and she's a runner. She's not quite a pilot. I guess you fly in the back seat of the T-38s, right?
That's correct.
So you have certain aeronautical skills and so on.
Yes.
What happens when you meet a man who's not in the space program and doesn't know who you are, and you say, I'm an astronaut? Does he say, you're too cute to be an astronaut. Come on, little lady, you can't be an astronaut?
I just tell him I'm an engineer.
You don't tell him you're an astronaut?
Not unless he asks.
Do you really, you mean when you meet people for the first time?
What kind of question is that to ask to an astronaut? Would you ask that to the men?
Yeah. At the bar, I look like George Clooney, and I'm always worried about that. Yeah, no, those early women, they did, they had to bear a lot, that because the press was just so hyper focused on that. It's glad to see now that that crap is all gone. A different world that I lived in, different world that I grew up in.